Hello, my name is Phil Cornish. I am back with Cornish Talks Common Sense. We have a new topic for you today. This is a new topic, one that we really have not touched on before, one that I think is captivating our society just in recent months, a topic that has significant implications for the future, and a topic that I think is of interest to everybody. That is the subject of artificial intelligence. Let's come back in just a minute and we'll talk about AI and what it means for you in the future. We're back, and as promised, our topic of discussion today is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has been all over the media in the last months, unless you've been living under a rock. Artificial intelligence is an interesting topic because of what it portends for the future and the implications it can have for all of us in our lives. So let's do a little bit of a dive into artificial intelligence and see if we can make some sense of it. So what is artificial intelligence? Let's start with that. Well, as a person who has an interest in the human brain and consciousness, and I have a lot of books and literature on that topic, I can tell you that fundamentally there's kind of a breakdown, sort of a bipolar breakdown among neuroscientists in particular as to how the human brain functions. Some of the experts would say that the human brain is really just a type of computer. It functions very much like a computer operates. The other side argues that fundamentally the human brain and the computer are very dissimilar and have no or very little common ground at all. And we have to appreciate to begin with that the whole subject of our cognitive abilities as humans is really a pretty minute part of our knowledge. And that's because scientists really cannot even explain human consciousness. There are some people out there who would tell us that thinking is really just an illusion. I have one book that I didn't bring with me today called The User Illusion that talks about the human brain as really just being an illusion of reality. And there are other writers, scientists who have talked about this. Daniel Dennett certainly is one, and there are a host of others, David Chalmers and Marvin Minsky and others that have spent a lot of time studying this topic. So whether our human brain functions similar to a computer is still contested. My personal view is it is very dissimilar. Human consciousness is a unique phenomenon that we cannot explain. Some philosophers and neuroscientists like David Chalmers only believe in what he would call physicalism, which says that everything we know in the world is material. Everything is material. There's no soul, for example. He would deny the existence of the human soul. And the whole idea of how the brain functions, he would argue has to be reduced to chemical, electrochemical functioning and so on in the brain. But the reality is we simply don't know. Consciousness is such a unique phenomena that the best of our scientific intellectuals and neuroscientists, frankly, cannot explain it. So whether the human brain is like a computer or not, the reality is that scientists, since the advent of the computer, maybe we can go as far back as starting with Charles Babbage, but in the more recent generations, the development of computerization, at IBM and Bell Labs and other organizations that have been sort of at the foundation of the growth of the computer industry, have led to a exponential growth of capability for computers. And so we've seen it blossom technologically in unforetold ways in recent decades. We all know, of course, about the internet now and how computers and communications abilities have just grown with exponential force. And so it seems that our knowledge base has reached untethered limits. And in fact, I've said to you before, our program is a Judeo-Christian based program. And if we look at Bible references, we'll see that it talks about in a certain day with humans that knowledge will grow at unseen levels. And certainly we're reaching that time frame where knowledge is increasing at exponential levels. And so with our increased abilities with computer programming, now some clever programmers have effectively created what we would call artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence kind of started out slowly. You might remember now going back, I think probably close to a couple decades, when Garry Kasparov, the chess champion of that era, played a chess challenge match against a computer. I think it was an IBM computer. I think it was called Deep Blue, if my memory serves me. And so Garry Kasparov, the best human chess player of his era, took on a computer in a chess match. And that was really one of the first efforts of artificial intelligence gaining some prominence publicly. But it has grown significantly since then, and that now seems like a long ago relic from the past to speak of that level of artificial intelligence. But it's grown now at a mammoth scale. So what conclusions can we draw about artificial intelligence? Well, some would say it has benefits. It's good, right? I mean, we can access knowledge more readily. It's now being implemented with robotics and so on that can help in the employer workplace with computerized machinery and so on and programming. So clearly, there are some benefits. I would not deny that. But we've also seen some serious concerns about the negative drawbacks of what it means for artificial intelligence. And I talked about that almost 30 years ago in a book I wrote that I've told you about in our programming previously. My book called Now Through a Glass Darkly. The subtitle, Recounting the Human Captivity. And in that book, I referenced a subject that I think I saw coming as long ago as again, about 25, 30 years ago. And I want to just read an excerpt that I wrote in my book. And it goes like this. A short time ago, a television program, The Nature of Things, posed this question: can mankind build a machine that will answer all of the world's problems? Computer and cybernetic research has advanced so far that artificial intelligence and virtual reality are now capable of generating an image of man. Some people may recall a television series called Max Headroom, which was based precisely on this concept. An artificial man is close at hand. As God made man in his image, now mankind is attempting to duplicate his own corrupted image. And I'll stop there. And so this is what I wrote nearly 30 years ago. And I brought along with me today, maybe a lot of you don't remember Max Headroom. Max Headroom was a television program where an individual was killed, as I understand it, and he was kind of his cognitive functioning was recreated, and he became effectively an artificially intelligent, guided human being, and so artificial intelligence was in the ether back then in that day. That goes back to 1985, and Max Headroom was a television program that lasted for, I think, something like 5 years. So the idea of artificial intelligence has been around for a while, but where is it getting to now? Well, what we know now is artificial intelligence is largely dominated by two organizations, Google and Microsoft, and they largely are controlling what happens with the development of AI. And so that's been a concern, that monopolization of artificial intelligence. And so we heard the concerns expressed on that just in the recent weeks and months of 2023. And I brought along some articles that talk about that. Most recently, you probably remember hearing Elon Musk. Elon Musk warned just weeks ago that he was so concerned about the development of artificial intelligence that he urged that a pause be put on it. I have an article with me today that says Musk, prominent scientists, call for a halt to out-of-control AI race. So concerns are being raised at the level to which artificial intelligence is growing. Another article I brought with me says AI learning to outsmart gamers. In other words, the growth of AI is going to become so potent that even those who have programmed it, whether for a video game or something else, are not going to be able to keep up with the level of intelligence that they've created by machine through computerization. So that's a concerning feature, is who controls artificial intelligence. And right now, there are only a couple of the world's biggest companies that seem to effectively be in control of that. And then you've probably heard about other concerns that arise about how artificial intelligence can be used for negative consequences. Again, some of you might remember as far back as the Stanley Kubrick movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the computer there, Hell, begins taking over the space station and kills human beings and basically tries to take control. And there's a battle that occurs in the space station for control between Hell and the character played by Keir Dullea, who fights for control against that computer. So the negative consequences have been out there kind of in science fiction, but now science fiction is becoming reality. And so what are the concerns that develop because of that? Well, you've also probably heard the expression deep fakes. And deep fakes is referring to the manipulation of images and news stories and a wide array of media and documentation where it is going to become possible, and it really is already impossible, to discern reality from fiction. And that reaches a scary level. Because when you cannot tell whether someone has completely faked an image or a video, it's concerning. Just in the last weeks, we've seen programming where, for example, on the Joe Rogan show, he interviewed a very famous person, and it was completely fake. It was a completely non-real interview, made up, fictional. And I want to just take you back again to my book. We talked about this in an earlier program where, again, almost 30 years ago, I wrote about this concern that I saw unfolding and happening as long ago as 30 years of the growing inability to distinguish between what is real and what is phony, what is reality and what is fantasy or fiction. And I'll just read again a couple paragraphs from my book that I talked a little bit about in my my earlier program that touched on this subject. And so I wrote, the blurring of reality and fantasy is a phenomenon becoming increasingly evident in our society. It is quietly encompassing all facets of life. Principally, the tendency to mask reality with a more idyllic image has become evident in the field of entertainment, but it is a trend overtly apparent in the world of commercial advertising and even in the news media. In some contexts, the diversion from reality is arguably quite harmless, but in other cases, the agenda is more sinister in shaping human perceptions. And I went on to talk about, for example, back in that day, a movie, for example, by Oliver Stone about John F. Kennedy that really was made up of fiction together with pieces of reality. And an author who I really have a lot of respect for, John Leo, wrote about that back in the early 90s. And in 1991, I quoted an article where he talked about the growing trend towards infotainment, where made-up fictions are being thrust upon us in the entertainment industry and in other places as well of our society where the news and video and other media are affected so that we cannot tell any longer what is real and what is fantasy, because computers can alter photos, can change videos, change documents. And this brings us to another subject you just heard about, this chat GPT programming that is happening now, where you can ask the computer to write an essay for you. You won't have to hand in your own assignment at school. Get the computer to do it. Or they can write a poem for you. So it's getting to a point where, again, if you cannot distinguish what is coming from the human brain in a classroom at school versus what is coming from a computer and substituting as a legitimate essay or educational work that in fact is totally phony and made up from artificial intelligence, we're getting to a point that is concerning. So these are some of the negative consequences that perhaps you've not thought about. And I'm only touching on some of the superficial ones. Frankly, as artificial intelligence becomes more and more powerful, the concern is how governments will use it, how China, how Russia, how the United States may use artificial intelligence not only in the sphere of propaganda, but interfering with the systems, computer systems of other countries, their infrastructure that controls utilities and government functioning. This kind of cyber warfare can easily become out of control. And so artificial intelligence simply is a danger. Why do I say that? Because if there's anything we've learned as flawed human beings, it's that we tend to excess in our behavior. And so just as we are doing in many other aspects of our life where we're prone to addictions and prone to other excesses, the excess that we're prone to with computers is going to lead us to a place where it's going to overtake our human functioning and is going to portend serious consequences for humanity in the future. But subject to what I've talked to you about in other programming, and that is the idea of eschatology that we've talked about, and that is the idea that God has a plan for mankind. God has a mankind for this earth. That is the only thing that stands in the way of mankind undoing himself and leading to oblivion. But we know from the eschatology that we find talked about in the Bible that we know where the future is going. So we need not be alarmed or troubled by it, but again, we need to be vigilant as to what is going on in our world today. This has been a fairly intensive program. I hope it's been of interest to you. Thank you for listening.